Kaufman and Dr. Mark Atkinson. A little bit about both. Dr. Kaufman, she is Chief Medical Officer and VP of Global Clinical, Medical, and Health Affairs at Medtronic Diabetes, and also Distinguished Professor Emerita of Pediatrics at the Keck School of Medicine of the University of Southern California and at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. Dr. Kaufman has published more than 240 peer-reviewed and invited publications and 40 books or book chapters. You'll also be hearing from Dr. Mark Atkinson, who earned his PhD from the University of Florida, where he is currently a professor there in the Department of Pathology and Pediatrics. Dr. Atkinson has devoted more than 30 years to research of type 1 diabetes in order to understand three things about type 1. One, determine what causes type 1 diabetes, identify a means to predict who will eventually develop the disease, and also find a method to prevent and cure type 1 diabetes. First up, we will hear from Dr. Mark Atkinson.
Sticking around and coming back to this talk. I'm happy to be here speaking with Fran today. I'm just really the opening act for the real star here today for Fran. So we're in a place of higher learning here, education. So let me give, try and ask a little quiz here. How many, does anybody in the audience know how many years we've had insulin for therapy of patients? What year was it found, identified? What did they say? You're all right. No. So thank you. I'm sure somebody got the right answer. Actually, we're coming up at about the 100th anniversary of this. Yeah, okay, yeah. I see arms are pumping here. So, yes, there were some good answers here. And that's where I want to begin the story today, because what Dr. Kaufman and I are going to be talking about is this drug that did win the Nobel Prize in 1923 to individuals who identified the way to extract this hormone from the pancreas and then be able to treat patients with it. And it really was given, it was a miraculous event. And the reason it won a Nobel Prize is because it took what was before that, essentially a disease that was in some ways a death sentence, meaning that you could live for a few months to a few years without insulin. Usually the treatment was the one of starvation and exercise. And so this really was a remarkable event. And one of the things that happened was the patent to this was sold to Lilly for $1. And with the hope that Lilly and other entities would again get this around the world. And this too was the second part of the miracle. It actually worked. And that the formulation for how to do this spread throughout the United States and in Europe. In the United States, it was largely through Eli Lilly, and then in Europe, in Denmark, with the company we now know as Novo Nordisk. It truly was an amazing and miraculous event. And it took situations like this, where, and again, there's many different textbooks. And this is one that's just commonly used, that when you took a look at an individual that had this childhood onset diabetes, that where there was no way of treating it, and then the dramatic effects that can happen in terms of therapy when it's made available to them. So this, again, is about a 100-year-old picture. And I most times when I'm speaking to medical students or audiences, and I'm sure Fran's the same way, this is looked at as a historical event, something back in history, because, again, we don't see this here in the United States. It's because when you have childhood onset diabetes, again, you get an insulin. And so let's fast forward today, get more into modern times. Let me just say, how has diabetes care and treatment changed in the time since? And what are we doing in terms of getting insulin in these newly developed disease management tools to the world? Again, one of the things that I was recently speaking with a colleague about is it's never a good time to get diagnosed with diabetes, and it's never, whether it's you or your child or loved one. But it's interesting, if you just dropped in the world today with type 1 diabetes, you really don't understand how far the world has come and how much improvements have came along. So like an example, I mean, here, if you look on the left-hand side, again, you've gone from situations where you had these porcelain glass syringes with heavy bifurcated needles. You used to have to boil these syringes. And then now today, totally different ways that we deliver insulin, from the inhaled product to needles that are, almost painless, pumps, just very, very much advanced in treatments in the way of what we've seen today. Another thing is we've moved over the years from measuring essentially how well you're managing your diabetes by a urine test to now, again, we all know about the instantaneous blood glucose monitors. We've changed the way that the disease is treated, meaning that for years and years and years we used to talk about having very strict diets and no sweets and very regimented lifestyles, to where today, a lot of those types of notions have been relaxed. So the way we treat the disease and approach it is different. And of course, the other major change is when I showed you those pictures and how the Nobel Prize came in. Again, the insulin used to be extracted from both beef and pig pancreases. And now, again, today, the insulin we use today is all recombinant. It's made in the lab. So there's been a major advances in the way that we treat insulin. But here's another situation. Again, as I told you, and I showed you that graphic picture earlier, and I said, most audiences that they think that this is a thing of the past. And again, here on the top is another picture of what happened almost 100 years ago when you didn't have insulin and then you gave the child. But the picture on the bottom is one that was, again, just taken last year of a child in India. That's part of the program that Dr. Kaufman and I were part of. And this situation on the bottom is repeated tens of thousands of times every year throughout the world. And so the type of, even though today we have, again, they offer great care here in the United States for children with diabetes, it's not that way around the world. And you can go into certain countries and there's essentially, we can think about private rooms for our care in our hospital, but there's essentially diabetes wards, where again, the way that if they don't have access to insulin, the way they're treated is essentially, again, starvation. And again, the statistics are here. One of the problems you have in the developing world is just to try and get accurate statistics. It's really a challenge. So we have to do estimates. And there's estimates that there's about 500,000 children, so say less than 15 in the world globally, have type 1 diabetes. And there's probably another 500,000 to say 15 and 25 years of age. But if you look at how many of those children don't have access to insulin in a known form, meaning consistent, know it's going to be there, again, estimates, but it's somewhere between 80 and 100,000 children, representing about 47 of the developing nations. And then if you go on beyond that into areas like adults living with diabetes, if they live that long, or adults would live with type 2 diabetes that need insulin, again, it's quite a bleak picture, a sad one. And so one of the things that we want to see that change. And why? But even before you see that change, you have to say, well, why did this happen? And again, part of this has to do, there's multiple reasons for why this situation exists globally. And I'm going to talk about maybe 3 of them just as an example of many. And one is the cost of insulin. And again, if you haven't been around diabetes for a long time, although I met somebody with diabetes for 53 years here, and she can, I'm sure, remember when the cost of insulin was far less than it was. In the 1960s, it was less than $1 a vial. 1970s, so over a long period of time, it actually remained stable. But then with the advent of insulin analogs, and then moving from the beef and pork insulins on the other, the cost rose dramatically. And again, you can just see the price range here. You can still at Walmart get regular insulin for like $25 a vial, but if you start going up to some of the analogs that can come, $200, $300 pens, and then the U500 insulin is just off the scale compared to this. So insulin cost certainly is one of the contributing factors. But then there's this whole notion of the care of somebody with type 1 diabetes. And again, I'm not here to knock this. Our patients, we try and provide every one of these things and the best thing. There's no reason not to feel guilty about that, and that's why I'm here today. But again, the cost of treating somebody with diabetes, as you know, is quite dramatic. And this was an illustration from an article that was in the New York Times last year. For I think 3 or 4 days, it was the #1 most emailed article. And this article took a look at two individuals, two ladies, young women, both who had an A1C, say of 8, but one of them, they didn't have all the best insurance, didn't have everything they could, and their cost of diabetes care was on the higher figure, the upper line, the $4,000 one, whereas another individual that had max care is $26,000. They had the same A1C, but it's just the point I'm trying to make here is that if you put everything on the table, diabetes care can be quite expensive. And if you just pick an intermediate cost, and I know you may probably know how much it costs in your family, but if you look globally at the situation, and Fran and I, Dr. Kropp and I were talking beforehand about our travel schedules. I think next year I'll hit my 4 millionth mile on Delta. I do have my picture with George Clooney and the CEO of Richard Anderson of Delta Airlines. And part of it is because Fran and I have been to a lot of the places on the map here. And if you just look at the cost expenditures per individual, and these figures are provided by the WHO, you don't want to live in those red areas because, or the orange ones are yellow. You can see where we are in the United States in terms of expenditures. But if you're, say, a family and your entire income is $300 per year and you have 5 children and the cost to provide insulin is $350 a year, even at a reduced cost to family, you have to make tough choices. And it's a pretty sober thing when you're standing and talking family and they say, well, unless you can do something for me, I've got to let my child, and then they fill in the blank. But that's a tough choice that has to be made every day in the global world because they can't afford the simple cost of insulin. Another reason that it's a challenge globally is we take, I know when we had the little lights out here a few minutes ago, don't know how that happened, but for a lot, we take for granted often power. And again, if you go in the developing world, about 80% of the developing world, especially out in rural areas, power is not consistent. So now if you open up a vial of insulin and you're thinking, I got a month to go on this, what are you going to do? So people do amazing things. They'll bury it, they'll find shadow, or they do these clay pot projects where you can try and keep insulin 10, 15 degrees cooler by doing a little bit of trickery here, but even keeping insulin cool is a challenge. And so when you start stacking these things up and layering them up, it's really, really problematic. And I'm going to, again, like I said, my talk is really set up for Dr. Cochran's because I think she's going to give you a lot of personal accounts on what she's seen and tell some stories that I hopefully will help move you to action. There's a lot of words on here, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but to just assure you one thing is that Dr. Kaufman, myself, and many other individuals around the world are participating in programs that are breaking these problems down. Breaking the problems down to the cost of insulin, breaking down the problems of governments not recognizing that diabetes is a serious disease. Meaning if you're going to a lot of these countries, infectious disease is also problematic, malaria, HIV/AIDS, etc. And it's not that typically governments look at infectious disease much more seriously and will put resources to it more than they will a disease like diabetes, in part because they just don't understand it. So we're working with governments to try and change that. Other things that we're trying to do is, again, trying to reduce deaths, trying to get people out, train people in the field. Again, we think our pediatric endocrinologists are special, and we're happy if we get one here. Again, imagine in a world where different countries where there's no such real thing as a certified diabetes educator, where there's the team approach to diabetes management isn't there. Again, you're just happy if your physician in the clinic happens to have insulin that week. It's a very, very different thing. So we're trying to work on these. We're even down to the point of trying to develop low-cost ways to refrigerate insulin that could keep things going. So again, too many things, but I just want to let you know that a lot of thought is going to this to try and make change. A lot of those changes are happening with organizations, and if any of this is of interest to you today, I'd encourage you to look up to these organizations. If you go online and Google something like donate insulin or some of the terms that we'll use today, you'll find out that there's a whole series of organizations out there that are trying to make a difference. What I'm going to give a little push for in the last 2 minutes here is one that that we represent, Brandon and I are president and vice president of this organization called Insulin for Life USA. We're a very green organization. Hopefully there's some greenies in here. And that it's just a shame if you have diabetes supplies at the end of the month and you don't need them, extra insulin, extra syringes, and then what do? You either take them down to Walgreens and say, dispose of these, you'll take your physician's office, here, can you take these? Or you'll just throw them out yourself. And then when you compare that, where if you made these available through our organization, Insulin for Life USA, they'll be actually used to keep people alive. And we currently have about 5,000 people that depend on us at a global level for their diabetes supplies every day. So the way we work as an organization is we take these unopened, in date, and well taken care of supplies. You send them to us, and then we're fully licensed and insured and bonded and not for profit in the United States. We take those materials, organize them, and we have partners all around the world that we inspect thoroughly and vet, and we distribute to them. We don't give it to patients, but we give it to the providers. And then that in turn is given free of charge to these people who have no other way to pay for their insulin. These are the types of things that we collect. And even for meters, strips are a particular need, but also, again, insulin in any kind, shape, or form. And so, if you're interested, I encourage you to write down our website. It's just www.ifl-usa.org, insulinforlifeusa.org. And if you go on there, you'll find information out about how our organization collects and receives materials, how you can get it to them. If you provide them, we provide you a letter, and it's a tax write-off for you. But we're just this organization is just one piece of the puzzle. And again, I showed you earlier that many organizations are working on this, and we believe things are going to get better, and they are going to get better because we're going to work harder than ever to try and make a change. As I find this right now, we really encourage you to get active in this field. And again, if you have a chance to tell people about what it's like, what you've heard today, I'd really appreciate it. Tell your friends and others about Insulin for Life. But now, like I said, the real highlight of the program is about the conference. Thank you.